T, he's British, you know. Also, let's please welcome back to the stage from our Down Under delegation, Miss Daisy Cousens. And next up, we have a man who grew up in the great state of Michigan. I love Michigan. In a working class family, growing up in poverty as well as working in retail and manufacturing helped inform his blue-collar perspective on issues of working rights, healthcare, and politics. Jeff Waldorf now represents the rising wave of independent media creators challenging the mainstream. Around the Nation with Jeff Waldorf is part of the Young Turks Network, TYT, on YouTube. And let's welcome its host, who may or may not be running for public office with that intro. Please welcome Jeff Waldorf. Jeff, you had an amazing TYT hat. I'm so disappointed you didn't wear it. Next up, we have political comedian, keynote speaker, producer, and director Graham Elwood, the host of the political vigilante podcast Packs a Heavy Punch, which is why he is a regular guest on The Jimmy Dore Show and Aggressive Progressives on TYT. He is also the director of First Nations Comedy Experience on FNX. Please welcome Graham Elwood. Thanks, man. Hi. Thought you came out here with a drink. That's just water. Last up, we have a talented comedian and musician that boldly takes on issues surrounding politics, race, and philosophy. A fellow member of the tribe, what up? Who has a raging hard-on for Ayn Rand and major beef with Ben Shapiro. This man has an unflappable belief system. I'm also told that he single-handedly put Sargon on the map. So let's please give it up for Rucka Rucka Ali!
Fan 10 out of 10 for form. Good. Welcome to the panel Demonetized. So we're going to be asking the question, what role should corporate America play in activism? And I know this because it's written here. If you cast your mind back a little while, you may have remembered when Gillette thought the most wise advertising strategy would be to wag the finger at toxic masculinity. And there has been some reports of some monetary losses in that field that many have attributed to this ill-advised campaign. So I think I'll open with Rucka and ask him how he responded to the Gillette emphasis on attacking toxic masculinity. And is it a good idea for advertisers and corporate entities to get political in that way?
I don't think so. But the question is, why do they think this is a good idea? And I think we live in a world where PR is everywhere. From company advertisements to working with nonprofits. I mean, when you look up your ex on social media and you see how much fun they're having without you, that's PR. They carefully crafted this picture and sent it out into the world. So PR is everywhere. And the reason that companies think they need to show how much they care about the issues is for a number of reasons. It's quite possible that with Me Too happening, some people at Gillette were bracing themselves for accusations, but also it could be with cancel culture around past releases, past tweets, past whatever. Gillette obviously has a lot of skeletons in the closet by today's standards. A lot of their commercials would not be, looked upon kindly. So they feel like they need to kind of show everybody, signal to everybody how much they're woke and, down with the struggle. Ultimately, the problem lies in us. The fact that we want this from companies. We want companies to show us that they're in this for more than just creating a product and selling it to us. We need to see that they're hurting a little bit, and I think there's a lot to explore there.
Jeff, as a man of beard, is this a choice or is this a protest? And how did you feel about the Gillette advert?
Does this work?
Is it switched on?
Yeah, it's switched on. Are we good? Can you hear me? Okay, good. It's my first time. Okay. Be gentle, right? Okay, so, no, it's not a protest. It's just, okay, here we go. Oh, yeah, much better. Thank you. No, it's not a protest. I look terrible without a beard. Let's be honest. Like pedo face. It's terrible. Trust me. Okay. So as far as the Gillette ad, I didn't really care about it, and I don't think most people do. Most people, I think, just care about buying a product like, oh, shit, I'm out of shaving cream. I got to go get some more. Or I got a razor. I think what people are most pissed off about, and at least this is from personal experience, is the insane price of razors. Like, come on, man. Like $17 for a razor and 4 blades, or 2 blades. You got to be kidding me. So I have that issue, and I don't actually have the issue with the advertisement. There's masculinity, and then there's toxic masculinity. Masculinity is 100% fine as being good to people. It's not being super aggressive and going and getting into random fights to show how tough you are. That's not the toxic kind, right? I mean, getting into fights and stuff, that is the toxic kind. But most people are not toxic. Most men are not toxic. And so they don't really care too much about this issue. They don't care too much about the ads and the advertising. And, as far as I'm concerned, like I said, I don't really care about it. And I like my beard.
It is a good bit. Congratulations. I'm going to take that back. All right.
If there's an extra microphone, if someone wants to bring it up, one of ours is malfunctioning.
So, Graham, how do you feel about your products and advertisers sort of moralizing to you? Does that irk you in any way? Do you not care?
No, I think corporations are here to help us. Is this the wrong? No. Hey, man, fuck them. I mean, it's like, let's be honest here. These corporations are, I agree with everything that has just been said. Like, they don't care. They jumped on an opportunity. If toxic masculinity was trending well, they'd be like, shave your beard, pussy. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they would do. They would jump on whatever thing they could possibly jump on. And, like, if you want to... I'm so tired of corporations doing this. Like, first of all, like, Shell Oil is spending $20 million a year for green energy. Oh, but the other $20 billion they're spending fucking the planet up, we're going to keep that quiet while we show a couple nerds in a lab with plant oil going, wow, Shell's really on our side. It's all bullshit. Corporations don't give a rat's ass about anybody. They would skull fuck a puppy if it turned to nickel. And I'm not anti-puppy. I hope, and if there's puppy fuckers in the crowd, we'll have a reasonable debate afterwards. Yeah, they're full of shit. If you want to address toxic masculinity, why don't you talk about the fact that we've been at war for 18 years? Why don't we talk about the fact that we are in a never-ending state of war?
Okay, Daisy, so from puppy fucking to war, if we could maybe circle back round to Gillette for a moment. How do you feel about this?
Those warmongering puppy fuckers at Gillette.
Right, okay, so if anyone wants to claim warmongering puppy fuckers as their band name, now is the time to take it. Because that shit will be gone by the end of the day.
Hashtag. Start that hashtag right now. Hashtag right now.
Daisy, how do you feel about adverts moralizing to us? I mean, how would you feel, for instance, if they were mimicking a political opinion you actually happen to agree with? Would you be for that then?
No. With the sort of corporate activism, I try to be very, very principled. It doesn't matter what kind of political opinion they're pushing or what they're trying to do. All I want corporations to do is to sell me the products I like. That's all I want. All I want them to do. I don't look to them for any kind of moral guidance for the reasons that all of these gentlemen have just outlined. And this sort of corporate, woke capitalism, I suppose you'd call it, it is all just to turn a dollar. I mean, if you look at the Gillette commercial, for instance, that was directed by a woman, an Australian woman, I apologize for her. It was directed by a woman, and it was actually, if you look at it, it was targeted at women, not men. It was all very kind of maternal. You had these, sons running around with their mothers, comforting them when they'd been bullied, and then images of fathers stopping other bullying. It's because women do most of the shopping. So women are the ones mostly at the shopping centre buying things and buying their significant others razors. So the target was, oh, look at that lovely Gillette ad. Oh, that makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Now I'm going to buy razors. So that was the sort of trick behind it, actually. And I'm a bit cynical about the get work, go broke thing, because all it did was put Gillette's name in the spotlight for a very, very long time. And all the people who didn't care about it, which is most people, were like, oh, how about I go buy a razor from Gillette today? So that's what I think of corporate activism.
Okay. So, Rucka, I'm from the UK. That's why I talk funny. And in our country, they've just enacted some new laws in advertising standards where you cannot enforce stereotypes. They're saying it's harmful, and various companies such as Volkswagen, and we have a cheese called Philadelphia, strangely, not from Philadelphia. It's called Philadelphia. Then they got in trouble and fined and banned for portraying negative gender stereotypes. And do you think that's a good move? Do you think that's a positive move to try and eliminate these stereotypes in advertising?
Well, no. I mean, the biggest problem there is that the government's the one doing it. The government... everything the government does implies a gun pointed at the citizens. So the question is, should advertisers do it or not is separate from what do you think of the government doing it. I would like to see the government completely be limited to protecting our lives and property. Oh, wow. Okay, but a lot of you guys also clapped about grabbing Mark Zuckerberg and fucking him in front of Congress, so... we gotta sort through some of these contradictions. Yes, it is. It is. You're right. But
can you explain the downside of fucking Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress, real quick?
I'm sure there is one, but I can't think of any. But generally speaking, look at England and look at Europe to know what's lying ahead of us. And I know we like to think that if we're hard asses or anti-feminist, anti-SJW, that we'll be able to avoid their fate. But believe me, my friends, when you abandon the individual, when you throw him under the bus, when you treat him as though his rights are a favor that we, quote unquote, we up here, or we in Washington, or we the intellectuals, we decide what rights he's entitled to keep or have violated, we are all headed in the same direction. We're all going to end up in London.
Okay, Jeff.
And fuck corporations!
So, Jeff, a lot was made of Colin Kaepernick's antics and his protest in sport, and a lot of people would describe that as anti-American or un-American. Whereas it could be possibly said that the idea of dissenting and protesting and congregating and displaying your dissatisfaction to the state is a very quintessential American thing in general. So how do you feel about the idea of having to respect the flag?
Okay. Just making sure this works, right? Okay. Well, look, I think respecting the flag and respecting the country protest is respecting the country. We started from protest. We started, the Tea Party, right? That should be quintessentially American, except that the French, right? You look at protests in Europe, for example, right? We got nothing on the French. Can we get a permit? Can we do this? Can we do that? I don't want to inconvenience you for my protest. Where the French are like, burn the shit down. Burn it all down. Like, you're going to take away a vacation day? No, fuck that. Burn it down. I'm going to overturn your car today. So we have gotten so far away from what it means to actually have a protest that stuff that shouldn't be considered a protest is like, oh my God, can you believe that? Colin Kaepernick kneeled for the flag. Oh, how disrespectful. Well, for one, Kaepernick actually did talk to Army veterans, right? And asked, hey, is this protest okay? Is this a form of protest that doesn't actually, go against the military? Because that's what it's not about. It's not about disrespecting the flag. It's not about disrespecting the military. It's actually about respecting like minorities, racial minorities, who right now are feeling the boot of the government on their necks. And so they don't want that. They're protesting. They're getting shot in the streets. And so, his protest, I think, is necessary, and it starts a necessary conversation.
Okay. So, Graham, back to puppy fucking. No. How do you feel about this idea of being un-American, protesting the flag or kneeling during the anthem, things like that?
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, this country was founded by protesters. I mean, when that whole Kaepernick shit was going down, I was posting like on Twitter, like, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington should observe King George's law and stop causing all these problems. You know what I mean? Because that's what this country was founded on. And the NFL is such a great example of the corporate sort of ruling class and how they operate. So what the NFL could have done is said, we're America's game. This is his First Amendment right to take a knee. The people in the stands, they can cheer him, they can boo him. That's their First Amendment right. That's what the First Amendment means. It doesn't mean I get to speak and you got to shut up or vice versa. It means we both get to have that. But no, the NFL gets tens of millions of dollars from the United States military to push their goddamn war machine. The players, it wasn't until about 2008 or 2009 that the players came on the field and stood during the national anthem. They used to be in the locker room, but the military paid the NFL for that. That's why when you go to an NFL game, I used to play high school football. I used to love it. I can't watch it anymore because I feel like I'm watching fucking Triumph of the Will every time I'm at an NFL game. There's jets flying over, and it's like, I've done 7 comedy tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait. And thank you, one guy. And what do you hate America, you motherfuckers? But that's like I did that to support the soldier, the person who probably joined because we have a poverty draft. And then this is what the NFL does. It just jams and it pushes the war machine. It has all of its ads are either for the military or the new war video game. There's an ad for Marines that shows a young girl fighting tough and becoming a Marine. And I'm like, oh, great. Now they're telling young girls, you too can join the fucking war machine. So the NFL, man, I got it. And I'm so tired of that. You can't protest the flag. Open up a goddamn history book. That should have got a bigger applause right there. Like I was hoping for kind of a
I was waiting for
a big boom on that last one.
Hey, Graham, those bomb people aren't going to bomb themselves, right?
What's that?
Those brown people aren't going to bomb themselves, though, right?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Yeah, I know. We got to keep the war. They never ask how we're going to pay for anything good. Exactly. They never. Well, how are we going to pay for Medicare for all? How are we going to pay for free college? They always ask that question. They never ask, how are we going to afford another war? How are we going to afford a war in Iran and Venezuela? No one ever asked that goddamn question. There's no anti-war movement in this country because corporations have bought it out.
Let's not forget corporate welfare.
Yeah.
We had a very healthy anti-war movement in this country a short time ago, and because Obama was elected, nobody apparently was against war anymore. So. I should add, since I just kind of threw myself into the anti-war applause, I do believe there is a time to defend the country, but there needs to be a clearly stated, identified threat. That threat needs to be identified, eliminate the threat, and protect Americans, and then go home. So I'm not just completely anti-war and without any context.
Okay, this quickly turned into the war panel. USA. Daisy, so in the wake of the sort of Me Too movement and the idea of employers needing to give the impression or at least show to people that they care about their workforce and people being treated fairly, there's a lot of sensitivity training going on, and there's a lot of rules and regulations about workplace conduct. And I just wanted to get your opinion about what sort of effect that might have on personal relationships between people of the same gender, opposite gender, etc. Is this having a good effect or a bad effect in your view?
Well, I very rarely use the O word, but as a woman, I am very personally offended by the idea that men in my workplace need to be trained to somehow tippy-toe around me and make sure all my emotional needs are met. And I don't know if the ladies in the audience agree with me on that point. But that, to me, is the equivalent of 1850s kind of couch fainting oh God, we've got to corsets and protect women from men. How terrible! It's just so regressive. But as for sensitivity training generally, I haven't read any kind of information, and maybe you gentlemen have more information on this and can correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't read anything that suggests that it has a tangible effect in reducing tensions in the workplace or unconscious bias. And in fact, recently, the HuffPost, that bastion of progressive thought, was reporting that sensitivity training doesn't work and citing the science. It was a very interesting article. But I just think it is going to have such a detrimental effect on male-female relations because it breeds resentment and also paranoia amongst men, as if, oh, well, if I talk to a woman, am I going to get accused of sexual harassment? And it plants a huge seed of distrust in women of the male species because this zeitgeist is so prevalent. So any kind of hello or how are you from men is perceived by women as, oh, well, is he trying to crack onto me? Is this toxic masculinity? So we've got to a point, I don't think the recognition of, say, discrimination in the workplace is a bad thing, and certainly over several decades there was a lot of problems in the workplace. But we've got to a point where the pendulum is just dipping in a direction that I find very troubling.
Jeff, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to, how would it be best to strike the balance between ensuring women aren't exploited in the workplace or treated unfairly, and yet protecting common natural interactions and relationships?
Well, I mean, you have to have an open workplace. And what I mean by that is, when somebody has a complaint, it has to be open and it has to be accountable. There has to be somebody that you can go to if there is an actual issue of sexual harassment. Being able to go to maybe somebody that's not your boss. I mean, that's step number one, right? Because obviously if it's your boss that's sexually harassing you or somebody who's friends with your boss, you're not going to get very far. So as far as striking a balance, I think going maybe outside of the hierarchy and being able to report to somebody, they look into it, and they figure out if the complaint has merit.
Rucka, some of the phrases that have entered the common vernacular, mostly from, I would say, left-wing circles, is this idea of microaggressions and unconscious bias. And I was wondering how much science underpins those concepts in your view. How much value do you think they have? Are they worthy concepts to consider?
Well, you've asked the right guy, because I am what they call a scientist who dropped out before he could get certified. Look, I mean, these what we're seeing around us in the culture, all roads lead back to the university, absolutely. And this is bigger than are you being a little bit aggressive on the micro level. I mean, these are people who believe that the individual cannot directly observe reality and use his independent judgment and act on his judgment. They believe that when you were born, you were assigned a certain gender and a certain race, and that these are all social constructs, and that you are now, because you were treated a certain way by society, you see the world a certain way, and that you can't get past that. This is all kind of the backdrop behind. Before we see the crazy people shouting on campus and whatnot, this is what they are taught at a philosophical level. And the opposition to them has largely been biological determinism. People saying, oh no, you're determined by a race. You still can't observe reality directly independently. It's your blood, it's your glands, it's your genetics. So we are dealing with determinists on all sides, and we need to rediscover the age of reason. We need to get back to understanding that every individual can observe reality, think independently, and must do so. And that's why the French Revolution looks so different from the American one, because Rousseau wrote in French and John Locke wrote in English. Ideas are where we got these. Philosophy is where free speech came to be. It's the reason you have a right to speak freely is because you need to think freely. Thinking and speaking go together.
Graham, let's keep on this theme of unconscious bias. Do you think it's possible that there are some unconscious biases that you have that obviously you wouldn't be aware of, or you wouldn't think you had, like maybe towards gender or race, that might manifest still, but you're not aware that you're actively pursuing those behaviours?
Can you repeat the question?
Certainly can.
No, I heard you. I'm just being a jackass. Yeah, I mean, I think this is such an interesting topic because I think, we're all sort of victims of how we were raised, the environment we grew up in. I can just go through some of my own personal experiences. I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a basically white liberal college town. And then when I was 12, we moved to Evanston, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And I went to a junior high that was 60% black, right? And I had a completely different experience. I mean, just completely different. And I saw, like I said, I played high school football. So all the other teams in our conference were all white North Shore suburban schools, and they had this different view of us. And I saw basically anyone that grew up in an environment where everyone's kind of the same, their view of anybody outside of it is just off. It's just skewed. There's just no two ways about it. And we having traveled the world and watching news in other countries, again, the French Revolution, that's a big story everywhere else but here. And here it's just like, some French people are going nuts. They've been protesting for 40 weekends in a row or whatever, and it's crazy. Now, I think going to Rucka's point about, I think the universities that used to be this sort of, this cultivator of radical thought and exchanging of ideas in the 60s, when they saw how, kids are rejecting this, they're not going to sign up for our ridiculous war in Vietnam, they came in and said, now let's make them fight about, identity politics and what like that. It's been used as a tactic. Again, I'm just a firm believer. There's the ruling class and there's everybody else. So everything outside, they just do everything they can to keep us divided. Red state, blue state, white, black, male, female, liberal, conservative, because if we all 99%ers got together, we would realize, oh shit, they are screwing us over. Such a great point. Again, because I think this is all tied to the war movement and everything. Yeah, look what Obama did. He made such a great point. There was this anti-war movement. Bush's war in Iraq was bullshit. Obama becomes president. He takes us from 2 wars to 7, and the left just goes the fuck to sleep. And then drone strikes okay.
Go ahead.
I think the anti-war movement in the first place was largely confused and misguided with so many nihilistic people there that they don't even want America to defend herself, let alone do all the nation building. So I think, again, we need a clear understanding of what the purpose is of a military and then have them act swiftly and effectively. By the way, the universities in the 1950s and 60s were cultivating emotionalists. They were cultivating hippies that don't think in any sort of rational way, and that's why the hippies were reckless and dirty. And I think we need to stop whitewashing the 1960s like, what happened to the radicals for free speech? These people were suppressing speech. They were using force. They were holding their own professors hostage in some cases. These people were most disagreeable, and they irritate me.
So, Daisy, keeping with the theme of unconscious bias for a second, and specifically racial bias, are we all just a little bit racist, and there's some sort of tribal aspect of the human heart that we just can't seem to eradicate? Can we offset any racial biases that we might have?
I think human beings are inherently tribal. I think that's just how we've evolved. But in terms of is everyone a little bit racist, I think it really does depend on your upbringing and how you've been socialized. Because and whether you sort of are brought up to focus on the individual or the group. I was brought up very, very much as an individualist, and that came from having two parents who are actors, and it was all about they were very rational people, but it was all about the concept of the individual. And it would just, the idea of different races or different nationalities, it never crossed my plate as a kid. And because I continued with that trajectory of thought, I can genuinely say that I view people, don't want to blow my own horn, but I do view people first and foremost as individuals before I view them as men and women, et cetera, et cetera. And if I feel any kind of bias creeping in, and it's usually against my political opponents. Let's be honest, they're not very nice to me, so sometimes I'm not very nice back. But I do try to think, hang on, no. Everyone is a person here with different life experiences, fighting different battles, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if we all really consciously think through the frame of the individual rather than the group, then that's how we will actually eradicate racism and bias and things like that.
So, Jeff, if we were to take a look at statistics in sort of prosperity, in sort of education, employment, wealth, things like that, and we notice time and time again a particular demographic was doing far worse than everyone else, would affirmative action be a sensible solution to that problem?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, it seems to engender a lot of resentment, especially when you deal with, that in the workplace. You get a lot of people who are understandably angry that they may get supplanted by someone else because of because of being an African American at the same time, or Latino, or et cetera. At the same time, you also have to think about, okay, how do we make sure that these people can also succeed in these areas? So it's a very complex, nuanced situation. For the one hand, you do want to protect people who are, of lesser means. But at the same time, you also don't want people to be replaced for ridiculous reasons, basically.
Graham, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that, the idea of affirmative action to offset any disparity in certain demographics?
Oh boy, this is a fucking jackpot. In some instances, yes. I mean, because in some instances, if there is a group that has been marginalized, then they should. Because I'm a straight white guy that was born middle class, so there's a whole system set up for me to succeed, right? Provided I work hard. But then I've seen other people in other situations, they don't even have access to any of this stuff. Like, I see my 6 nieces and nephews, and none of my brothers or sisters are rich. They all have decent middle class. And my nieces and nephews have all this access to all these sports leagues and all this other stuff. And then I'm big brother to a kid who lives in South Central LA, and there's none of that. He has none of that. And in his neighborhood, there's no Trader Joe's, there's no health foods, there's no Pilates studios. There's none of that. They have access to none of it. And I'm like, that inequity needs to be addressed one way or another. And I don't know I know this isn't like an economic forum on wealth inequity, but I mean, that something needs to be done, because it's not right. You know what I mean? And, there's no healthy food in them. And I'm in Los Angeles, which has got all these vegan restaurants and all this other stuff. And then right in the heart of Los Angeles, in these neighborhoods, there's check cashing, there's fast food, and a liquor store. And, so something that has to be addressed some way.
Graham, you just explained every place that I've grown up in.
Right. No, it's everywhere. I travel all over the country.
It is. White or black. It doesn't matter. These places exist for both white and black people.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you go through West Virginia. West Virginia has 50% unemployment. It has an opioid epidemic. It has contaminated water in some areas worse than Flint, Michigan, and it's a primarily white state. It just shows you that, again, the capitalism is fucking everybody.
That's it's a good point. Rucka, if you could pick that up from the opioid crisis.
Good point, that.
And well, who are we pointing the finger at in that sense?
It's the problem is lack of capitalism. I love how first you hear. Again, we'll see who's clapping when I say that Facebook and Google should be left free and that banks should be deregulated. Oh, a little bit quieter than this time. But look, whenever people push for bigger government, they say, oh, come on, we've got Social Security, we've got Medicare, we're basically there already. What do you want us to do away with those things? Okay, then let's build it a bit more. But then when things go to shit, then it's, oh, capitalism fucked us. Well, which is it? Listen, what we need is deregulation. What we need is privatization of everything that does not involve force. When it comes to retaliatory force, that is the purview of the government. Water should be privatized. I want Dasani to be providing me with my water. I'll pay them my water bill. If I'm going to Flint, I'm just staying away from any sink and toilet completely.
Rucka.
Yeah.
I love you, man, but it's not capitalism that's the problem. It's corporatism.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The notion that privatization, dude, like maybe we just agree to disagree here, but like, let's privatize everything. Like what? The prisons?
No,
I mean,
because that, like I said, retaliatory force, the court system, these are the proper functions of government, and prisons should not be privatized.
Well, the other thing, too, privatizing the water is awful because the water companies like Nestle, oh, my God, they are completely corrupt. And then you talk about corporate welfare, like, again, you're going to the, why should government be paying for this? Well, why don't we, first of all, take the $370 billion a year that we give to subsidize the oil companies? Why don't we take that money, this notion that, oh, socialism is bad, the police department socialist, the fire department, libraries, schools, public parks, street cleaning, snow trash cleanup, all of that. So, like, we have the money, and when we spend 65% of our budget on military, that's part of the problem, too. All that money is there. All that money's there. It's being spent on all this bullshit, and then we privatize the military so Halliburton and them can take it over and quadruple the cost of things. I mean, it's...
Look, if you want somebody to defend cronyism, get a Republican up here. That is not who I am.
Daisy.
I am the one saying we need the lobby system is what got us into this mess, and how the lobby system came to be is from people saying that the government is here not merely to protect us, but to give us stuff. Now the government became in charge of picking winners and losers. Now it's all about pressure groups. Now we're all incentivized to form tribes. Now we're not incentivized to think as individuals, but to be part of the community, and that community has a lobby, and now it's a hate crime to talk about us.
But deregulating banks is what caused the 2008 recession.
Banks are the most regulated entity known to man. They have bureaucrats. The big banks have bureaucrats with offices in their very headquarters. And if you say there's a lot of corruption, yeah, that comes from bureaucracy. That comes from government and private companies being in bed together. I'm the one saying divorce them completely. Let the banks fail. Let the companies fail. If Nestle can't provide us with clean water, first of all, you should be able to sue them and possibly prosecute them if they're poisoning their customers. But in general, I'm for letting companies fail and not making government more in bed with private business, but the opposite.
Well, if you want to pull private business out of the government, I'm all for that. But when you say deregulate the banks have spent billions of dollars to get themselves deregulated. I mean, they were deregulated. Obama didn't prosecute anything. He passed Dodd-Frank, which is a fucking Band-Aid on a shotgun wound. Clinton got rid of Glass-Steagall, which was Depression-era FDR banking regulation that allowed the 2008 crisis to happen. So I guess I'm confused. You want your private money out of it, but then you're saying deregulate. The deregulating.
The banks were put in the position in the first place where they had to behave a certain way, dealing with the context they were put in. So I would have had the banks deregulated from the start. The more banks are regulated, the more they're told what to do, the more catastrophes arrive. And then who do we blame? The banks, of course. We hate bankers. It is the most popular position. It is so mainstream. It is so normie and blue-pilled to hate banks. This has been in Western culture since the Dark Ages. Hatred of the Jews turned into hatred of the bankers, and the names have just basically hardly changed. We hate bankers because we don't really. It takes an intellectual thought to understand what they do. All these guys do is move numbers around. All they do is shuffle papers around. These are the people that make everything around us possible. They lend capital to the people that create all the companies that we patronize, that elevate our standard of living. Same with oil companies, by the way. Get them out of Washington, end the lobby system, absolutely. But these fossil fuel companies, these oil companies, they make every other company possible. They extend our life. They make life possible. Everything around us came from fossil fuels. So absolutely. So if any of you young people want to be badass and you want to be punk and you want to be rebellious, start championing for a free markets in banking as well as fossil fuels. You'll find out who's punk rock right away.
This is the least regulated time we've had. In the 50s, when everybody, especially conservatives say America was so great, right? We had the highest banking regulation, we had the highest tax rate, and we had the highest union membership.
Okay, gents, I'm really enjoying this rally. It's wonderful. It's really great. Maybe you should continue it later in the debating zone as well, because I'd love to see that, but I do have to bring some other people in. Daisy, Rucka touched on it a moment ago, this idea about the government choosing favourites and winners in that sense. And so is there a systemic solution to inequality? Should something such as diversity quotas ever come into play in any situation, in your view?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I think that the point all these other gentlemen have raised here that's very good is that the ultimate privilege and divider isn't race or gender or sexuality, it's class. Yeah, class is the great divider in society, and as you were saying, like there are people who don't have access to any kind of thing. And in Australia, it's a little bit different. We're a bit more egalitarian, probably because we just have a smaller population to manage. But in terms of diversity quotas, all that satisfies is optics, really. And certainly in the context of gender quotas, if you look at, say, quotas on boards, for instance, like 10 years ago in Norway, the government decided to make a compulsory 40% quota on corporate boards, 40% women. And the penalty for that was that you could no longer be a public company and you would be dissolved and just everything would turn to dust. So the result of that was a lot of companies just went private. They took themselves off the list, but the result of that was there was no discernible effect really on the profitability of companies who had instilled this quota. The data was inconclusive, and not only that, it didn't actually help women as a whole. It only helped women who were already high achievers. So they got put on these boards, but there were hardly any more positions created for women in senior management or middle management. And what women do in the workforce, it's part of this toxic femininity, is relational aggression and the rope ladder effect, which means that women will climb up the ladder, the corporate ladder, and succeed, but then they'll pull it back up after them and won't actually help other women to succeed. So that's what we saw in Norway. So all of this sort of affirmative action stuff, I just think, why? I just want the best person to do the job.
Jeff, I'd like to get your...
I will say, if I could just say really quickly, but again, back to the situation of class, people need to be facilitated to have equality of opportunity rather than equality of outcome. And the solution to that, I think, is maybe better schools in those areas, being able to provide people with better education and better facilities. I don't know, but I do think that the great divider is class, and that's what we need to rectify in terms of equality of opportunity rather than race and gender and quotas for equality of outcome.
So, Jeff, keeping with this idea of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome, certain companies have pledged to have 50% female workforce and things like that. Do you think employers really should file their demographics to represent the percentage in the nation? Do you think that's how it should work, that people should look to represent all people equally?
Well, I mean, yeah, I want all people to be represented, obviously, equally, and I want everybody to have a chance. Like, I want that equality of opportunity, because you can't have equality of results without basically pissing people off and also not representing most people, you know?
Okay. So Rucka, where do you fall on this? I mean, do you expect to see people represented in line with the demographics in the country in general?
I'd rather not. I'd rather we move away from that. But, I mean, keep in mind, when we talk about equality of opportunity, what that amounts to is punishing people with any perceived advantage, egalitarianism. I think we can see where that has been tried in the most consistent way, Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge. I mean, this actually happened in the name of equality, and equality not just of outcome, but of opportunity. Why should one, just because you were born smarter doesn't mean you should think of ways to make more money. Just because your parents were rich doesn't mean you should have better opportunities. They literally kicked everyone out of the city and put them all into a field and said, you're on your own. It's starting from scratch. But then some of them were still better at surviving and prospering than others. So they killed anyone that seemed to have any sort of advantage. If you wore glasses, you were killed, because that means you're literate. They killed about a third of the population, if I'm not mistaken. No, individual rights being protected is all I'd like to see.
Great.
Oh, wait. Are you gonna make a comparison between allowing someone to have a good school and being murdered?
No, listen. I feel very strongly that the most urgent thing this country needs to do is abolish public education and watch the Steve Jobs of the world. Watch the Steve Jobs of the world and watch the Bill Gates of the world put their mind into how could I create the best schools and the most efficient schools out there. Watch these desolate neighborhoods suddenly have the McDonald's efficiency, the Walmart efficiency of teaching them. That's what I'm about. So I agree. Listen, a lot of neighborhoods have shit schools, and it's seriously unfair that the government puts them in that situation.
Do you know how schools are funded? Property taxes.
Yeah.
So if you have poor areas with disadvantaged people who are already disadvantaged, and then you fund the schools through disadvantaged people, they're going to have children who are also disadvantaged.
Right.
So that's the problem.
Okay, then how do they?
You find a different way to fund schools with more what the actual community needs.
You notice how people in poor neighborhoods, they still watch Disney movies and they eat from major companies like Coca-Cola and Burger King, and they wear Nikes. So big companies love selling products to everyone, including poor people. I would like to see education be the next Silicon Valley. I would like to see the freest, most deregulated sector of the economy be education, so that we can see it rise to unforeseen, undreamed heights.
Yeah. Just like to throw in here something. I could not disagree more, because all we've seen from the corporate sector is they don't care about the betterment of society. They don't care about the betterment of people or the individual, as you very concisely put it, is important. Look at Jeff Bezos, right? He has employees that are like taking welfare. They're getting food stamps. He gets tax breaks. He's worth $158 billion, and his employees are still having to go on welfare. And when Bernie Sanders threatened to stop him with the Stop Bezos Act, then he raised it to $15 an hour, which was just a tactic so he wouldn't have to pay union wages. Here's a guy that could cut his wealth in half. He could give $75 billion to his employees. And in your theory, if he was the noble person that you think he is, he would do this, and his employees would have these amazing lives, and they would infuse that money. But instead, they are barely getting by. Corporations, all they do... Pardon?
You said Bernie doesn't pay 15 either.
Yeah. Okay, fine. All right. He unionizes employees.
This is a fantastic time.
I just want to say, let's take some questions, shall we? But Jeff Bezos' nobility is not measured in how many favors he does or how much charity he gives. His nobility, his virtue is measured in the fact that he created a gargantuan empire that made both him an enormous amount of wealth and made everyone's life way cooler and way more
except his
efficient.
Employees' lives.
His employees, if they choose to work for him and they agree on what they're going to get paid, is free association. It's amazing that even in today's highly regulated economy, a genius like Bezos is able to provide anyone with a job whatsoever. And his employees, by the way, they can go home, they can order shit off of Amazon much quicker than it would take them to go to the mall. Go ahead.
Let's give it up for Rucka's enthusiasm.
Yeah.
You're repeating the talking points of the ruling class, but that's
question time. It's working.
All right, Are we going to turn on that DUI checkpoint light again?
Oh, yeah. All right, so I'm a recent graduate of a large public university.
You have to talk a lot louder, crazy louder.
I recently graduated from a large public university. As a requirement for my physics degree, they made me take a course in which I was required to take an implicit bias test and write an essay using experiences from my life to justify 3 different groups to whom I was racist, but I didn't know it myself. I ended up protesting and actually not having that be required. I took a different course instead. But how would you handle similar situations if the universities are going this far?
I would challenge their premises. What do they mean by racist? What is their standard of measurement here, first of all? I mean, like I said earlier, philosophically, we've deviated so far from the scientific approach. We've become either subjectivists of this variant or of that variant, or we think everyone's part of a biological group or in some way tribal and they can't help it. We need to really turn the universities back into places of learning and respect for reality. There you
Next
go.
question.
You can clap for that.
Okay. So I'm going to try and take this back to the topic at hand of demonetization.
I'm sorry.
This is the war panel, sir.
So, I just lost my train of thought. For example, YouTube, they have the system of demonetization, and we have the people who we're in the how do I put this? Where you have the people who are outraged, the majority who are outraged that get things that push for things to be demonetized. Sorry, but that's my question is I was having a thought that I personally don't like how social media winds people up and creates this outrage culture where we all get offended and they push towards getting us involved in.
There's a question in here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Just making sure.
I was thinking that maybe what we should do is have a movement towards. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Have a movement towards free speech logic and not being. I really have lost my train of thought.
It's all right, man.
Yeah, we. Holler at me on Minds. I'll read your question.
Yeah, I say we have a movement. It's called Minds IRL. Get on board.
Hi. I just wanted to address. Thanks. I just wanted to address Me Too and workplace related stuff. So I've been a mechanic for 10 years, and I get along great with my coworkers because I'm good at what I do and I can take a joke. I really see Me Too as being a divide, like a wedge between people who maybe otherwise would have good interactions. I see the motive behind it, but I really think a vocal minority has pushed this to, push it to a head, and I really think it's detrimental to being in the workplace. I'm all for equality in the workplace, but I'd like to get an idea of where we should go from here. How do we get back to a place where we can all work together?
I think what needs to happen is that the so-called silent majority really need to feel empowered to start talking and start actually making noise about how, I totally agree with you about the Me Too movement. I think the principle was great. I don't think anyone would complain about Harvey Weinstein being called out, but it has been so weaponized by a lot of very unscrupulous fourth wave feminists.
Daisy, that's a great place to stop right there. Boom, I love it.
What? Sorry?
That's a great place to stop right there. Oh, next person.
Excuse me?
Such a microaggression.
As I was, yes, such a microaggression. As I was saying, we all need to make our opinions known on this topic. And yes, it is intimidating when social justice warriors get on the internet and call you everything from a misogynist to a white supremacist, but you know you're not. So tell them off, call them out, and express yourselves. Don't be daunted by them. I think that's how we fix it.
So, different from how, or otherwise from how social media websites use being either a platform or an editor, in which reality they kind of claim they're both. Why should companies hold all views as equal even if they disagree with it? As an add-on to that, is it fine for them to be part of a political movement or to essentially pick a side, regardless of if they're neutral or not?
No, I mean they're never going to do that. I mean they're like I said, and obviously maybe I stand alone on this one, but they're just using it for their own power and their own gain. I mean, this whole demonetization. So Google runs YouTube. Any anti-war video I've done, they've demonetized. I've done a bunch of Jeffrey Epstein videos calling out the ruling class of both parties that are involved in the international pedophile sex trafficking ring. The majority of them have been demonetized. Which goes to my other point. I'm not trying to stir it up, Rucka, but that's why I don't trust big corporations, because Google is in league with the intelligence community.
Well, you're showing us with your own actions that the individual has volition and agency, and you don't need to use these websites if you don't want to. Nobody's been demonetized and deleted altogether more than me. Everybody knows that. Okay, you go out in the street, ask someone if they've heard of Rucka Rucka. They'll either say no, or they'll say, oh yeah, he's that guy that YouTube deleted. I get it. But this whole publisher platform thing is absolute bullshit. It's the same as going into a bookstore saying, do you carry this one book? They say, oh no, we don't carry that book. Oh, then you're a publisher and you're now responsible for every word in every book in your store. It's nonsense. It's stupid bullshit that conservatives are coming up with so they can still pay lip service to capitalism while backstabbing capitalism at every turn. I don't buy it.
Let me just say, too, that deplatforming and demonetization, it's all complete bullshit. Even if there's speech that you don't agree with, all speech should be welcome. And if you don't agree with the speech, by the way, the best way to counter bad speech is more speech.
Yeah.
So with regards to my question, it's simply, should we actually still define corporations as being a separate entity as representing one person, as we've seen people make the spiel over how they should be separated from being this separate entity when they say, oh no, corporations represent a single person. Should this still be the case when you have pretty much conspiracy at this point of them conjoining like the Borg with bipolar disorder? That's for all of you guys, not just a single one.
I love the Borg reference, by the way.
Resistance is futile these days.
Indeed. So as far as your question goes, look, corporations, in my view, they're not people, right? Corporations aren't people, and corporations are also, and I'm gonna be, you're gonna probably disagree with me, Graham, for a second here, but look, I don't think they have morality. I think they're amoral. They're legal fictions, but that's why they should be regulated, because their entire purpose is to make profit. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But in the pursuit of profit, if you allow them to do whatever the hell they want, they will cut corners and they will do whatever they can in order to maximize profit. That's why we need to have smart regulation on it, not over-regulation, which happens, which shuts down smaller businesses, by the way, and favors larger corporations, but have smart regulation that makes sense, that protects workers, that protects consumers.
Do you believe it was like everyone is born ignorant, but it takes effort to stay stupid?
Yes.
There we go. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
That was a great question.
That's how you do a question, folks. Just fucking bang, bang, boom, yes or no. We're all on to the next one.
How's it going? The United States government, its pretty much only function is to protect our rights, correct? My question is, what is the government going to do when large corporations do not respect our rights, such as free speech on platforms? I feel as though that while we don't need to over-regulate these companies, I do think that there is some sort of need, if you're going to be in the United States, to actually recognize our constitutional rights as a corporation.
I think what you're actually going to see is corporations being forced to pay lip service to your rights, and the government less so. The government will basically be free to violate your rights. We need to stop conflating economic power with political power, and we need to stop conflating what we have today with a free market. We would have many more competitors to Facebook and a much higher standard of living in general and much more ways of communicating and doing other things if we hadn't been tying businessmen up for the past 100+ years and making it extremely difficult to do business in this country, especially in the finance sector.
Competitors like Minds.com?
I'll just have a quick rebuttal to that. I think it's already happened. We don't have a representative democracy. We have a kleptocracy run by oligarchs. So they've already got control of everything. America is a corporation.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. We've blurred the distinction between government and business by having the government bureaucrats and businessmen work together every day, and which is why we need to deregulate and have a very clear understanding of what the government's job is, to protect your life and property.
Or how about we get corporate money out of politics?
Absolutely.
And union money.
That's exactly what I'm saying. If politicians can't pick winners and losers, if they can't grant any favors, why would anyone want to give them money?
Do you believe that it's really possible to say that you can have capitalism without corporatism, or is that sort of like saying you could have the Soviet Union without having Stalin, or you could have China without having Mao? Like when you remove the theory from the world when you try to bring the world of theory to the world of people, isn't there an inevitability that you're going to get a messy system with, in this case, all of these externalities like the climate issues and the workers' issues? Is it not disingenuous to say, oh, people who wanted communism and got the Soviet Union, that was an inevitability, but people who wanted capitalism but who got corporatism, it's not.
No, because in the 19th century we had something pretty close to a free market. It wasn't perfect, but it came pretty close, and what we saw is the population quadrupling, infant mortality either doubling or getting cut in half, whichever is the good one. You saw an insane rise in the standard of living at a time when business and government stayed in their lane. And over time, and it begins with universities, it begins with philosophers, with intellectuals saying, well, maybe we should engineer society a bit. Maybe we should help business and government kind of work together a little bit. That's where we get corporatism. That's where we get cronyism. And it's only going to get worse the more we try to get the government to get more involved. I'm telling you, we're moving in the wrong direction. We're going to lose the internet. You're going to lose your memes, kids.
I don't know. In the 19th century, we had the Gilded Age, and we also had the things like the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, where you had exits that were blocked off because you didn't have proper regulation.
Look, if you block an exit and somebody dies in a fire, I would say you can very well be charged with some type of manslaughter right there. So I don't know the details of that particular fire, that case, but I got to tell you, pointing to one fire in the 19...
no, there's a history.
Okay, those incidents are the standard with communism. That's all you get with communism. So you can't compare the two.
All right, guys, we got our two very last questions. Lunch will be tiny bit shorter.
On the subject of public education, are you familiar with the works of John Taylor Gatto? And would the best route to reforming public education just be removing truancy laws? Thanks.
So I know what truancy is because I was I got detention for it many times. So basically stop making teenagers go to school. If they want to drop out, they can. Is that basically what truancy laws are? Like I said, privatize education, problem solved. Yeah, you got something? Anyone?
Horrible mistake.
Well, I was just going to say, truancy laws definitely impact people of color even more so than they do poor people. It's basically a punishment on the parents who might not be there, might be working two jobs, etc. And so, yeah, we got to get rid of those truancy laws.
Hi. I'm a Native American Mexican woman. I'm also a combat veteran. I'm married to a white man. This is a question on equal opportunity. I have a really shitty credit score, but because I'm a part of two very protected classes, I have the opportunity with the Small Business Administration to get a business loan. I have the opportunity through corporations to be hired based on the demographics that I fit into, but my white husband was unable to get a business loan because he's white. Yes, that's capitalism. That's starting a business. Well, he couldn't go into a corporation because they have certain demographics to fill, and they don't want to be too whitewashed. So is that not just institutionally discriminatory towards a race? Why in 2019 are people the same way I don't want corporations or the workplace to tiptoe around me for my gender? I don't want the government or corporations to tiptoe around me for the color of my skin instead of the merit of my hard work or the content of my character. So how in 2019 is that still justifiable? And if we can agree that that may not be the best avenue, what would you recommend a fair solution to be?
Daisy, I feel bad. Do you want to... I cut you off last.
End capitalism.
Increase it.
Maybe a new That's going to be the name of our new show.
Since I've been so generously granted to answer this question.
Rude.
Look, that is absolutely what you would call systemic discrimination against a person based on their gender and race, which I thought, as a Western, liberal, as in the way Australians use the word, country that we were against. And it's extraordinary to me that in 2019 this is the case, but it is based on the principle of retribution that has been pushed throughout popular culture, really, by cultural Marxists, everyone who's on Twitter, all of that kind of stuff. And it's based on the fact that white men are allegedly the oppressive class and are all lumped into one group. The individual has been totally disregarded, and therefore they must now be suppressed as to wreak revenge from a sort of white patriarchal past, which is so completely senseless. Because if you look at the statistics of white men, they're committing suicide in record rates. There's an awful lot of poverty. Well, like we talked just then about whole states that are in America that are largely white, that are terribly disadvantaged, that have poisoned water. So the principle does not hold water, proverbially. But it appalls me to hear that, and it is not what we should be aspiring to as a Western society. Not in the slightest.
I like how you looked at Stephen when you talked about suicide. The UK is not that bad. It is pretty bad. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Let's first give a huge round of applause right here. This was amazing. I learned so much. I already ordered 3 pairs of Nikes and activated a Gillette subscription. So this was a good discussion. So lunch is going to be 35 minutes in length. You guys can stay here or go wherever, and we will be back here at 4:20 Giggity for Dank, Hunter, and if you want to listen to Rucka, he'll be here too. Thank you.